Hey there, it's Courtney with RCK Livestock, where we document our journey to self-sustainability through our garden and our livestock. Today I'm going to go over my top 5 favorite seeds that I used in my garden last year. If you followed us last year, I made a few videos and you could kind of tell how our garden was struggling. These seeds did an exceptional job, in my opinion, on living and producing through a struggling garden. So it's really, in my opinion, great for beginning gardeners, first-year gardeners, because these plants were put through the ringer and they still were able to produce some sort of output. The first one I want to show is a flower, and it really surprised me because I wasn't expecting anything really out of anything. But last year I got the Calendula Pacific Beauty mix from Baker Creek Seeds. Actually, all of these seeds I'm going over is from Baker Creek. The calendula I started from seed indoor. It was the only flower that I started indoors that survived, and they just ended up being like this really pretty bushy flower, and I planted them on the ends of some of my beds and they produced beautiful blooms. There was an overall large plant. I think in a less neglected garden they will do a much better job, produce even more than last year, and I look forward to seeing what we can do this year. Along with the calendula, another flower that I had, I'm not going to count this as my top 5, but another flower that I had that was really nice as well was my marigolds. I don't have that seed packet because I planted them all, but those as well, I was able to just throw the seeds out into the garden bed and I was getting blooms from those. So I am planning on getting marigolds again this year, and hopefully I have them producing just as well as last. The next 2 I'm going to go over are my tomato plants. As you know, if you followed along, the tomatoes that I had were not high producing at all. I got a total, out of my entire garden, I got a total of 3 1-gallon bags, like Ziploc bags, of tomatoes through the whole entire year. I didn't save any other than cherry tomatoes for fresh eating, so everything that I did get from my garden, I cleaned and prepared and put it in the freezer in hopes of being able to have a high enough yield to can, which with 3-gallon bags I did not have enough to can, but I went ahead and reduced all of the tomatoes down into a sauce and got 3 pint jars full of tomato sauce that we had for a couple nights worth of dinner. So it wasn't a high yield, obviously, but in my opinion it wasn't a failure either because I was still able to put some food on my table. The 2 that really stuck out to me was the Sartre Roulotte, and this one was more of just kind of a fun experimental tomato, but this was the only slicer tomato that I planted last year that produced any fruit. So, I still didn't get a whole lot, but it stuck out to me because it still produced fruit when other plants didn't. So I do plan on keeping this on my shelf in years to come. My other tomato was the Amish paste. I planted a bunch of tomatoes, but these are the 2 that stuck out to me. The Amish paste was not the highest producing paste tomato that I had, but the tomato, and I'll go into more in depth with that here in a minute, but so it wasn't the highest producing, but the fruit that I did get were larger tomatoes and they were fairly perfect. I mean, there wasn't hardly any that I lost to blossom end rot. So they were able to handle the neglect that I was giving it, and then the fruit was larger as well. The other paste tomato that I planted was the Martino's Roma, which that one was largely the highest producing tomato that I had, but it's not in my favorites because I probably threw away about 60% of those tomatoes that I got from them due to blossom end rot, and a lot of them just weren't even big enough to do anything with. So the chickens got a lot of food from those. But with that being said, I am planning on planting the Martino's Roma, whatever I have left over from last year. I plan on planting in my garden this year to see if it can handle a hopefully better year, better circumstances than I did last year, so that it's a more fair comparison between the Martino's Roma and the Amish paste, and then hopefully by the end of this year I'll have a better picture of which one is a better producer for my garden, and we'll see what happens. So the last 2 that stuck out to me were in the squash varieties. I had the Ford Hook variety of zucchini, and these ones, I was able to eat fruit off of it. This is really what I'm comparing everything off of. The zucchini that I got, I only planted pumpkin zucchini and then yellow squash. And the yellow squash did okay. I got a few fruits from it. Not a whole lot, but the zucchini I was able to, go out a couple times a week and be able to eat something off of those plants. So that's what stuck out to me. I've always, in the past, when I was younger growing up, we always had good luck with zucchini. So I'm not super surprised that I was able to grow more than other plants. But I'll be excited to see how this does this next year. And my final one for you is the Connecticut Field pumpkins. These were the ones that really surprised me because I got toward the end of the summer and I had 2 pumpkin plants, and I did not see a single pumpkin on either one of them the whole season. And then probably the last month I see a little pumpkin, just out of all the greenery, I just see a little green pumpkin. And so I kind of kept an eye on it, and then all of a sudden I had 2 pumpkins. So these 2 pumpkins ended up growing about 14 inches in diameter each. They were the most perfect, beautiful pumpkins I had seen, and they were the only 2 that I had, so I was super excited about them. They handled the neglect that I gave them. So last year was not a failure, because in my opinion, a failed garden is a garden that, just is an unplanted garden, just nothing in it. So I learned a lot from my garden last year, but these plants right here, they did, remarkable, because they were able to produce an okay amount, not the highest producing in some of the aspects, but as far as our conditions last year, the soil quality was really poor. The sunlight was really damaging and harsh on them because I had them on the far south side of our yard. The sun is super intense on that garden. There was no shade whatsoever, and my watering situation was really difficult. We had to bring a trailer in when we were able to fill up some totes with the water, and then it was just a super labor intensive watering situation. So hopefully we're able to par that down a little bit better this upcoming year. So the ways we're going to remedy this next year is moving our garden out of raised beds and into in-ground. So this is hopefully going to keep our soil a lot more moist, and it won't, obviously dry out as fast, meaning I won't have to water as much. We moved our garden over to the north side of our yard, where there is going to be some morning and afternoon shade in different places. So they get a little bit of relief from that intense sunlight, and it's going to be closer to our fencing, where I won't have to move the trailer for the water into the yard to be able to water my plants consistently. So with all that being said, I'm excited to see what this next year brings, and we'll see what happens. So I know this was a super quick video. I just wanted to go over these real quick with you. If you're a beginning gardener, I would highly recommend these seeds. And if you gardened last year and want to let me know what your favorites were, go ahead and put in the comments below. Thanks so much for hanging out with me, and I look forward to hanging out with you next time. Thanks, guys.